I'm 83 years old, and I only recently understood why some people go quiet when I walk into the room. I don't mean strangers, I mean my own family. It's a hard thing to admit this late because I spent most of my life thinking I was the easy one, the calm one, the one who didn't yell, didn't slam doors, didn't make a mess of things. I thought that was what made a man good to live with. Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of safety. And I never gave them safety, I gave them silence. I didn't learn the truth from a big argument. No one sat me down and listed my flaws. It came from one sentence my daughter said like it was nothing. I was at her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. Not a holiday, not a celebration, just an ordinary visit. She was telling me about a problem at work, a coworker who kept pushing things onto her. She wasn't asking me to fix anything. She was just talking. Halfway through, she stopped. Not because she forgot what she was saying, because she saw my face. She looked at me for a second, then said, very calmly, almost kindly, "I know, Dad, you don't like when I complain." And then she moved on to something safer. Weather, groceries, a show she'd been watching. It wasn't the sentence itself that shook me. It was how practiced it sounded, like she'd learned it a long time ago. I've never told her, "Don't complain." I've never called her dramatic. I've never barked at her to toughen up. But there I was, sitting across from my own child, and she was managing me. Like you manage a room with a fragile object in it. Not fear, caution. I drove home afterward without turning on the radio. I kept replaying that moment, but not in a self-pitying way. More like I was trying to match a fingerprint to a hand. Because when you're 83, you don't get scared of conflict the way you do when you're young. You get scared of patterns. And that moment had the shape of a pattern. I started thinking about all the small times someone changed course around me. The way conversations at family gatherings stayed clean. Updates, schedules, who's working where, who bought what house. No one really wandered into anything messy. I told myself it was just adulthood. People are busy, people keep it short. But then I asked myself something I didn't like. Were they keeping it short? Or were they keeping it safe? There's a difference between being included and being known. I've been included my whole life. I got invited. I got called on birthdays. I got pictures of the grandkids. I was never abandoned in a dramatic way. But being included can still be a kind of distance, if everyone knows what not to bring to you. Once I started looking for it, I saw it everywhere. My son, now in his 50s, doesn't tell me stories as they happen. He tells me the ending. He gives me the conclusion, the outcome, the what we decided. He doesn't bring me the part where he wasn't sure, and I used to think that meant I raised a strong man. Now I'm wondering if it means he learned I don't have patience for the middle, the messy middle, the emotional middle, the part where you don't yet know what you think. I've always been a get-to-the-point person. I respect clarity. I respect structure. I respect people who handle things. And for a long time that felt like a virtue. But sitting alone after that Tuesday morning, I started to see how that virtue might have had a shadow. Because clarity can be a comfort, but it can also be a pressure. There's a particular kind of pressure that doesn't come from anger. It comes from certainty. From the feeling that you're being evaluated, even when no one raises their voice. That's what I never understood. I thought as long as I wasn't cruel, I was safe. But safe isn't the same thing as easy. You can be stable and still make the room tighten. I remember a dinner we hosted years ago, back when my wife was still alive. Nothing fancy. Friends, a pot roast, laughter. Someone was telling a story and got a detail wrong. Off by a year, maybe 2. Without thinking, I corrected it. Not sharply, not rudely, just automatically. The table kept laughing. The story kept moving. But my wife reached under the table and rested her hand on my forearm. It wasn't affectionate the way I remember it now. It was gentle, almost like a signal. At the time I thought it meant, "I'm here." Now I wonder if it meant, "Please stop." That's the strange thing about getting old. You start rereading moments you thought were nothing. And you start realizing you've been living inside your own interpretation for decades. You can build a life where no one ever argues with you and never realize they've been editing themselves before they even speak. I didn't see myself as controlling. I saw myself as careful. If something could be said more accurately, I said it. If something could be done more efficiently, I pointed it out. If someone was getting worked up, I steadied them. I told myself that's what love looked like. But I'm beginning to understand what it can feel like to live with someone who's always refining you. Even when it's quiet, even when it's reasonable. Because being corrected constantly, small corrections, polite corrections, doesn't feel like guidance. It feels like you're always slightly wrong. And when someone feels slightly wrong around you long enough, they start bringing you only the parts of themselves that won't be questioned. They don't explode. They don't fight. They just narrow. That Tuesday morning at my daughter's table made something click that I didn't want to see. It wasn't that she was afraid of me. It was that she was already adjusting her shape to fit the space I allow. And once you realize that, you start asking a question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. How many people have been shrinking around me for years, and I've been calling it peace? When that question takes root, it doesn't stay polite. It starts walking through your memories like it owns the place. I began noticing how often I've built my life around being the person who keeps things from getting messy. I didn't come out of the gate this way. I learned it. I grew up in a house where being fine mattered more than being honest. My father wasn't a yeller, that's what fooled people. They thought he was gentle. But he had a way of correcting you that made you feel small without raising his voice. If you told a story and it wandered, he'd cut it down. If you got upset, he'd stare at you like you were doing something embarrassing. He didn't say, "Don't feel." He made you understand you were supposed to outgrow feeling. So I did what a lot of boys do. I became competent. Competence gets you praised. And praise is addictive when you don't know how else to be loved. In school, I was the one teachers could rely on. At work, I was the one who didn't lose his head. In my marriage, I tried to be the one who, quote, kept the ship steady. I thought steadiness was the gift. But the older I get, the more I see that I used steadiness like a shield. Because if you're the steady one, you don't have to admit confusion. You don't have to admit fear. You don't have to say, "I don't know what to do with this." You can just manage it. And management became my default posture with the people I loved most. My wife, she was not like me. She had the kind of emotional range I didn't understand. She could be irritated and laughing in the same minute. She could tell a story that didn't land perfectly and not care. I used to admire it. It made life feel less tight. Then, slowly, my admiration turned into a habit I didn't name at the time. I started improving her sentences while she was still speaking. Not in a loud way, in the way a man edits a report. A word here, a correction there, a reminder that something was technically different than she remembered. I told myself I was just being accurate. But accuracy isn't neutral when it's constant. I remember one night, this keeps coming back to me because it's small enough that I never marked it as important. She was telling me about a woman at church who'd been cruel to her. Not a big incident, just one of those things that makes you feel stupid for being hurt. My wife sat at the end of the couch and I could hear something in her voice that sounded like humiliation. I listened for about 30 seconds and then said, "You should just stop dealing with her." Simple solution. Clean answer. My wife nodded. She didn't argue. Then she went quiet. At the time, I thought, good, problem solved. Now I see another possibility. She didn't go quiet because she agreed with me. She went quiet because the conversation was over. Not because we'd finished it, because I had closed it. That's what I did. I closed things. I closed them with advice, with logic, with clean edges. And clean edges are comfortable for the person who needs control. They're not always comfortable for the person who needs understanding. When the kids were young, it got worse without me realizing it. Parenting gave me endless opportunities to be, quote, useful. Schedules, rules, homework, money, repairs. I could handle all of that. I was good at it. But there were other moments without a task, that I didn't know come to hold. My daughter used to come into the room and hover. She wouldn't say what she wanted right away. She'd stand there, shifting her weight like she was testing whether it was safe to enter. And I didn't see it as a test. I saw it as inefficient. I'd say, "What is it?" in the same tone I used at work when someone was lingering outside my office. She'd give me a quick version of what she needed. Then she'd leave. I thought she was learning to be direct. Now I wonder if she was learning not to take up space. My son learned something else. He learned to anticipate. If he brought me a problem, he brought a plan with it. Even as a teenager, he'd explain his decisions like he was making a case. He didn't want conversation. He wanted approval. And I gave it when his reasoning was solid. That's what I told myself I was teaching. But when love starts feeling like it must be earned through presentation, it stops feeling like a refuge. The thing that haunts me isn't a single blow-up. It's how calm I was while shaping everyone. Because calm looks like safety to the outside world. Calm gets you called reasonable. Calm gets you trusted. And I liked being trusted. I liked being the man who could be counted on. I didn't notice the other side of it. How being counted on is not the same thing as being approached. There's a reason that Tuesday sentence from my daughter hit so hard. Because she didn't say, "You're mean." She said something more revealing. She said, without accusing me, that I had preferences people had learned to work around. And that's not the kind of realization that comes with a quick apology. Because you can apologize for a sentence. You can't easily apologize for a climate you created. Last week, my grandson left his tablet on my couch. A cartoon was playing, bright colors, silly voices. I almost turned it off. My instinct was to restore quiet, but I didn't. I sat there and watched 3 minutes of nonsense. And when he came back, he didn't apologize. He just sat beside me and laughed at a part he'd already seen twice. He wasn't managing me. He was just a kid. And for those 3 minutes, I wasn't the man who needed things to be correct. I was just his grandfather. That's all I want now. Not to be respected. Not to be right. Just to be the space where someone can be messy and still feel safe. I can't undo the years, but I can stop adding to the weight. And sometimes, that's enough.